60 years ago, when Canada needed fighter jets, the question wasn't whether to buy American. The question was which American model to choose. Today, Canada is announcing domestic production of Swedish fighters, while Pentagon officials watch helplessly as a defense market they controlled for 3 generations evaporates. What changed wasn't Canada's military requirements. What changed was that Trump spent 18 months treating Canadian sovereignty as negotiable, imposing arbitrary tariffs, and using defense procurement as leverage for political demands. And on March 12, 2026, Mark Carney stood in a bombardier facility in Montreal and announced that Canada will manufacture Saab Gripen fighters domestically with full technology transfer, ending automatic American dominance of Canadian military aviation that lasted since the 1960s. While Pentagon officials scrambled to understand how this happened, Carney was already signing implementation protocols with Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson, establishing production timelines, technology licensing agreements, and Arctic cooperation frameworks that formalize Canada's pivot away from American defense dependence. Tonight, we're breaking down how Canada's Gripen decision represents the most significant fracture in North American defense integration since NORAD's creation, how Saab's offer of domestic production and technology transfer provides what Lockheed Martin never would, Canadian industrial sovereignty, and how Pentagon warnings about interoperability and NATO standardization ring hollow when the party issuing warnings spent 2 years threatening the ally they're now begging to maintain alignment. Here's what nobody's discussing. Canada's Gripen decision wasn't sudden reaction to F-35 cost overruns. It was the culmination of 24 months of deliberate preparation for defense independence. The official story goes that Canada committed to 88 F-35 fighters in January 2023 under a $19 billion contract. But by December 2024, revised costs hit $27.7 billion, a 46% increase before a single aircraft delivered. Rising costs triggered mandatory procurement review under Canadian federal guidelines, but the real preparation started much earlier. August 2024, Carney's transition team begins classified assessment of defense industrial capacity. The study doesn't ask which fighter is best. It asks which procurement creates Canadian manufacturing jobs and technology capabilities. November 2024, Canadian defense officials visit Saab facilities in Linköping, Sweden. Official purpose, technical evaluation. Actual purpose, negotiating technology transfer terms Lockheed Martin categorically refuses to offer. February 2025, Sweden and Canada sign bilateral defense cooperation agreement. Media coverage focuses on Arctic security collaboration, buried in annexes, framework for defense industrial partnership, including potential licensed production of Swedish systems. March 2025, Carney orders comprehensive review of F-35 procurement, citing cost increases. Pentagon interprets this as negotiating tactic to extract price concessions. Actually, it's providing political cover for decision already made at strategic level. By the time Saab publicly announced its production offer in March 2026, negotiations had been finalized for months. The offer was formalization of agreements reached privately through diplomatic channels, while Washington assumed Canada had no alternatives. Canadian defense procurement traditionally operated on assumption that major platforms must be American to ensure NATO interoperability and maintain political relationship with Washington. F-35 was supposed to be an inevitable choice because no other option provided fifth-generation capabilities and alliance integration. That assumption died when Saab offered something Lockheed Martin's monopoly position prevented it from considering: full domestic production, complete technology transfer, and genuine industrial partnership where Canada builds sovereign capability rather than buying foreign equipment. Why did Carney order F-35 program review in March 2025 when costs were known to be escalating for over a year? The surface reason? Costs rose from $19 billion to $27.7 billion, requiring parliamentary review under procurement regulations. Fiscally responsible government must assess whether increased expenditure still represents value. But the timing reveals strategic calculation. February 28, 2025, Trump announces 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, with threats of broader tariffs on all Canadian goods. Defense procurement hasn't been targeted, but pattern is clear. Trump views economic relationship as leverage for political demands. March 3, 2025, Pentagon officials brief Congress on F-35 sustainment costs, revealing lifetime operational costs for international partners, likely 30 to 40% higher than original projections. Information is public but receives minimal media coverage. March 8, 2025, Carney receives classified briefing from Defense Department showing F-35 program would create 3,800 Canadian jobs through industrial participation. Saab's alternative proposal shown for comparison promises 12,600 jobs through domestic production. March 12, 2025, Carney announces procurement review. Statement emphasizes fiscal responsibility and value for money assessment. Doesn't mention jobs, technology transfer, or strategic independence. Those themes emerge later. March 15, 2025, Trump publicly demands Canada increase defense spending to 3% of GDP and threatens consequences if procurement decisions don't prioritize American systems. The threat is intended as pressure. It becomes justification for diversification. Notice what Carney's review statement didn't say. He didn't criticize F-35 performance or capabilities. Technical assessment isn't the issue. Even Canada's own evaluation showed F-35 scored dramatically higher than alternatives on combat effectiveness. He didn't question interoperability or NATO requirements. Alliance obligations remain important, but they don't mandate specific procurement sources when alternatives meet operational standards. He didn't announce decision was made. Review framed as open process, examining all options. But timing and structure signaled outcome. Canada was creating political space to choose alternative Washington would otherwise pressure them to reject. The language shift reveals intent. Early statements emphasized cost concerns. Later statements added maximizing Canadian industrial benefits and building sovereign capabilities. That evolution wasn't random. It was deliberate narrative preparation for decision to prioritize industrial policy over alliance standardization. While Pentagon officials were preparing briefings on F-35 superiority, Saab was offering Canada something American defense contractors never provide: genuine partnership instead of customer relationship. The Gripen production proposal has elements specifically designed to address Canadian priorities that F-35 procurement doesn't satisfy. Domestic manufacturing, complete Gripen EF assembly in Canada at existing aerospace facilities, not final assembly of mostly foreign components, actual production of major structures, avionics integration, and systems installation. Bombardier facilities in Montreal and Thunder Bay identified as primary sites. That's manufacturing capacity that persists after initial production run, enabling maintenance, upgrades, and potential future production. Technology transfer, full licensing of avionics systems, flight control software, and engine integration. Sweden offers this because Gripen uses open architecture design where systems integrate through standardized interfaces. F-35's highly integrated classified systems make technology transfer impossible under U.S. security restrictions. Saab's offer creates Canadian expertise in modern fighter technology. Lockheed Martin's model keeps Canada dependent on American technical support indefinitely. Jobs and Industrial Development Saab guarantees 12,600 direct aerospace jobs over production lifecycle. Supply chain mapping shows another 15,000 plus indirect positions in components, materials, and services. Compare that to F-35's 3,800 jobs through workshare agreements where Canadian companies manufacture specific components under American contracts with no technology transfer. Arctic operations integration. Gripen optimized for dispersed operations from austere bases, exactly Canada's Arctic requirement. Short takeoff capability, simple maintenance, and cold weather optimization match Canadian operational concept. F-35 requires sophisticated support infrastructure, limiting deployment flexibility in remote Arctic locations. Operational sovereignty. Gripen's non-U.S. systems mean Canada operates fighters without American control over software updates, mission data, or maintenance authorization. F-35's Autonomic Logistics Information System requires Pentagon approval for certain maintenance procedures and software changes. That's acceptable to partners trusting Washington. It's vulnerability to partners Trump spent 2 years threatening. Here's what this structure reveals. Carney isn't choosing inferior capability to spite America. He's choosing adequate capability plus industrial sovereignty over superior capability with permanent dependence. Gripen EF isn't fifth-generation stealth fighter like F-35. its advanced fourth-generation platform with modern avionics, ESA radar, and weapon systems integration. For Canada's actual missions, sovereignty patrols, NORAD alert, NATO contributions, Gripen provides sufficient capability while creating industrial benefits F-35 never could. Pentagon officials are choosing their words carefully when discussing Canada's potential Gripen selection, and those word choices reveal how completely leverage has shifted. Pentagon spokesperson, March 2026 background briefing, "We continue to value our defense industrial relationship with Canada and hope procurement decisions reflect the interoperability and capability advantages of joint programs like F-35. Notice the phrasing. Hope procurement decisions reflect. That's not stating requirements or consequences. That's expressing wish without ability to enforce. Interoperability and capability advantages appeals to military technical arguments while avoiding political pressure. Pentagon learned that direct pressure backfires with Carney government. Former Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition. Congressional testimony. Fracturing NATO standardization in fighter aircraft creates long-term capability gaps and operational complications that adversely affect alliance effectiveness." Translation: if Canada doesn't buy American, it complicates military integration. But notice what's absent. Any acknowledgement that threatening Canada for 2 years might have created political complications, making standardization less valuable than sovereignty. Lockheed Martin CEO, earnings call, "We remain confident in F-35's position as the world's premier fifth-generation fighter and believe Canadian evaluation will reflect that technical superiority." The focus on technical superiority misses what Canada's decision is actually about. Carney doesn't dispute F-35 is more capable. He's concluded that superiority doesn't justify the cost in money, jobs foregone, and permanent dependence on partner treating Canada as subordinate. The most revealing contrast, Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson's statement. Sweden views defense industrial cooperation with Canada as partnership between equals, where both nations build capability benefiting our shared security interests. Partnership between equals. That phrasing doesn't appear accidentally. It directly contrasts with American model where customer buys equipment from supplier and remains dependent for lifetime support. Sweden offers partnership. America offers transactional relationship where supplier retains control. Australia faced similar choice in submarine procurement during 2020-2021, though circumstances differed significantly. Australia had contracted with France's naval group for diesel-electric submarines under $66 billion program. After years of cost increases and schedule delays, Australia abandoned French deal and announced AUKUS partnership with United States and United Kingdom for nuclear-powered submarines. The decision prioritized capability and alliance integration over industrial sovereignty and relationship with France. Australia concluded that nuclear submarines' performance advantages justified relationship costs and dependence on American-British technology. But Australia's strategic environment differs fundamentally from Canada's. Australia faces genuine high-end military threats from major powers in Indo-Pacific. Canada's primary security concerns are sovereignty patrols and alliance contributions, where capability requirements are lower. More importantly, Australia made its decision trusting American reliability as partner. Canada's decision comes after 2 years of Trump demonstrating unreliability through tariffs, threats, and public contempt for Canadian sovereignty. The lesson isn't about submarines versus fighters, it's about partners making different calculations based on threat environment and relationship trust. When trust exists, capability arguments prevail. When partner threatens and insults you while demanding you buy their equipment, sovereignty arguments win. This isn't about fighter specifications. It's about whether defense industrial relationships operate as partnerships or as dependents. When the United States uses defense procurement as leverage for political demands, what message does that send? That buying American equipment creates vulnerability to future pressure? That interoperability means dependence rather than mutual capability? That alliance obligations are one-directional where smaller partner accommodates larger partner's demands? When Sweden offers full technology transfer and domestic production to medium-sized partner, what does that signal? That defense industrial cooperation can empower partners rather than creating dependency? That allies can build sovereign capabilities while maintaining interoperability through agreed standards? that defense partnerships work best when both parties gain capability rather than one supplying and one depending. For 60 years, Canadian defense procurement operated on principles everyone understood. Major platforms would be American to ensure NATO interoperability and maintain political relationship. Canadian industry would participate through work-share agreements providing component manufacturing. When capability requirements exceeded Canadian industrial capacity, buying American was obvious choice. Alliance relationship made dependence acceptable because America treated Canada as respected partner. That model just collapsed, not because capabilities changed, because trust evaporated. When Trump spent 2 years threatening annexation, imposing punitive tariffs, and treating Canadian sovereignty as subject to negotiation, Carney concluded that dependence on American defense systems created vulnerability Canada couldn't accept. Saab's offer provides escape from that vulnerability. Gripen may be less capable than F-35, but it's Canadian in ways F-35 never could be. Built by Canadian workers, maintained with Canadian expertise, operated without American approval, and creating industrial capacity that persists after initial purchase. The damage isn't reversible through technical briefings on F-35 superiority or promises of enhanced work share. Once Canada signs production contracts with Saab and begins building domestic fighter assembly capacity, breaking those contracts would waste billions already invested and destroy thousands of jobs created. No government does that to return to foreign procurement. Once Canadian aerospace workers gain expertise building modern fighters domestically, political pressure to maintain that capability becomes permanent. Workers, unions, and communities dependent on Gripen production oppose any future government considering return to foreign purchase. Once Canada operates Gripen successfully, demonstrating adequate capability for actual missions without American dependence, arguments that F-35's superiority was necessary lose credibility. If Gripen works, why spend more for capability Canada doesn't need while accepting dependence Canada wants to avoid? Once other American allies watch Canada successfully diversify defense procurement away from U.S. systems without catastrophic consequences, they recalculate their own dependencies. If Canada can choose European alternatives, why can't other partners? This creates 4 permanent consequences. First, American defense industrial dominance over Canadian procurement ends after 60 years. Future competitions genuinely evaluate alternatives rather than assuming American platform wins. Second, Canadian aerospace sector gains capability building military aircraft domestically, creating industrial capacity that enables future programs without American participation. Third, NATO standardization fractures as major partner operates substantially different fighter fleet. That complicates some coalition operations, but Canada accepts trade-off for industrial sovereignty. Fourth, precedent spreads to other procurement sectors. If Canada can choose European fighters over American, can it choose European missiles, radars, or other systems? Once assumed American dominance breaks in one domain, it weakens across defense industrial base. Pentagon can warn all it wants, but it destroyed the trust that made warnings effective. Pentagon could try blocking technology sharing between Canada and other Five Eyes partners who operate F-35, but that would explicitly confirm that buying American equipment gives Washington leverage to punish partners for independent decisions. Every ally would accelerate diversification, could try offering enhanced work share or technology transfer on F-35 to match Saab's offer, but F-35's classified systems make real technology transfer impossible. Offering fake concessions just highlights that American model inherently creates dependence Saab's doesn't. Could try pressuring Sweden to withdraw Gripen offer or limit technology transfer, but Sweden gains strategically from partnering with Canada. Shared Arctic security interests and defense industrial cooperation benefit Swedish capabilities while reducing American influence. Sweden won't sacrifice those gains to help Pentagon. Could try threatening consequences for Canada through reduced military cooperation or intelligence sharing. But that proves Carney's point, that American partnership carries risks Canada must hedge against by building alternatives. The leverage is gone. Pentagon's warnings assume Canada values American approval more than industrial sovereignty. Trump's behavior taught Canada that American approval is conditional, weaponizable, and unreliable. Once that lesson is learned, threats don't work anymore. Pentagon wanted Canada's defense procurement to remain automatically American, ensuring interoperability while maintaining U.S. industrial base. Instead, Trump's behavior triggered Canada's first non-American fighter procurement since 1960's Swedish defense industrial entry to North American market, 12,600 Canadian aerospace jobs in domestic fighter production technology transfer, creating Canadian capability in military aviation systems, precedent showing American allies can diversify defense procurement successfully, not through military confrontation, not through alliance withdrawal, through procurement decision that prioritizes industrial sovereignty over capability maximization and alliance standardization over partnership with unreliable supplier. Carney didn't reject F-35 because it's inadequate. He chose Gripen because it comes with something F-35 never could: genuine partnership where Canada builds capability instead of buying dependence. The question now is which other allies are watching and learning that lesson?